Previous class, we have learned on measure of central tendency, where you have learned on mean, mode, and median. And from this mean, mode, and median, you can identify the skewness based on these three values. And then we have learned on measure of position, where you learn on how to find your quartile 1 and quartile 3. And using both information from quartile 1, quartile 3, and median from measure of central tendency, you can identify the skewness of the data set based on box and whiskers plot graphing. Now we move on to the last topic on numerical descriptive measure, which is measure of dispersion. Now this measure of dispersion, if we use with measure of central tendency, mean, we can find coefficient of variation. And at the same time, we also can find information on the skewness of the data by using information from measure of dispersion and measure of central tendency. Okay, here in this topic, you need to know how to use scientific calculator to find your standard deviation for both group and ungroup data. What is measure of dispersion? If you rely only on measure of central tendency, which is mode, mean, and median, it will not tell you exactly a whole picture of the distribution of a data set. For example, I have information regarding age of the workers in company A and age of the workers in company B. So this is all the age of the staff or employee of these two companies. If I plot the information on this line, you can see that employee at company B have much larger variation of age as compared to company A. Both of these company A and company B, have the same mean age of workers, which is 40 years old. So if you just rely on the measure of central tendency, it will not be sufficient to reveal the shape of distribution of the data set. Okay, under this topic, the common measure used under measure of dispersion is range, interquartile deviations, variance, standard deviation, and coefficient of variation. Okay, this is the formula for ungrouped data and group data for standard deviation. Now, for group data, we need to have a value of midpoint. However, for ungrouped data, you just find the summation of all the data and summation of the data that the power of 2. So how are we going to use scientific calculator to find the standard deviation for ungrouped data? So this is the same example that I used in measure of central tendency. So we will use the same for finding the standard deviation for ungrouped data. When you have your data, the first thing you need to do is to make sure your calculator in a mode of standard deviation. So you press mode 2 times. So here you can see the first one is SD, which is standard deviation, regression, and batch. So we will use the number 1 here. So press 1. Okay. First of all, my first data is 30. 30 and plus. N equals to 1, which means that you have insert the first data. So to find your standard deviation, the value from the formula that you should obtain is from shift 1 here, the summation of all the data, which is total x squared. This is the value that you should have. So press 1 equal sign, you will get 24,925. Okay, and then you should have summation of x, number 2 here. Okay, once you have obtained all the information from the formula for standard deviation, you can get the last answer of standard deviation by press shift number 2, which is standard deviation of variance here. Okay, and then select number 3 because we use sample information. So here is the standard deviation for sample. Press number 3 and you will get 3.36. So from the example in previous slide, the standard deviation of the data set is 3.36.